Alexa, play SendMe Radio.
Listen to awesome Christian content on SendMe Radio. Download from the App Store and listen on our website www.sendmeradio.net. Numbers 17 recounts a pivotal moment in Israel's history where God reaffirmed Aaron's priesthood after the rebellion of Korah and his followers. Despite witnessing divine judgment in the form of an earthquake, fire, and a devastating plague in Numbers 16, the Israelites continued to question whether Moses and Aaron were truly appointed by God. To end the disputes once and for all, God commanded a miraculous sign that would confirm his divine selection of Aaron and the Levites as Israel's priestly tribe. This moment not only validated Aaron's role but also reinforced the sacredness of God's order and the consequences of rebellion. God instructed Moses to collect a staff from the leader of each of the 12 tribes of Israel. Each leader's name was to be inscribed on their respective staff, with Aaron's name written on the staff representing the tribe of Levi. These staffs were then placed inside the tabernacle before the Ark of the Covenant, the most sacred space where God's presence dwelled. The next morning, when Moses entered the tabernacle, he found that Aaron's staff had miraculously budded. It had not only sprouted, but it had also blossomed with almond flowers and produced ripe almonds, a clear and undeniable sign of divine selection. In contrast, the other 11 staffs remained unchanged. Moses brought out all the staffs and showed them to the Israelites, and each tribal leader took back their own staff. However, God commanded that Aaron's staff be kept as a permanent sign before the Ark of the Covenant, serving as a warning to prevent future rebellion. The almond blossoms on Aaron's staff held deep spiritual meaning. The almond tree was one of the most significant trees in the ancient Near East and the first to bloom each year, symbolizing God's watchfulness and faithfulness to his promises. In the Hebrew language, the word for almond, shakt, is closely related to the word meaning to watch or to be vigilant. This connection appears in Jeremiah 1 verses 11 to 12, where God uses an almond branch as a sign of his constant oversight. Just as the almond tree is the first to awaken from winter, God was actively watching over his covenant with Israel, ensuring that his divine order was upheld. The miracle of Aaron's budding staff was not only proof of his priesthood, but also a sign that God was always present and attentive to his people. The almond blossoms symbolized new life, fruitfulness, and divine blessing. The fact that Aaron's staff, a lifeless wooden rod, suddenly produced blossoms and almonds was a representation of God's power to bring life from death. This foreshadowed the theme of resurrection seen throughout Scripture, reinforcing that true authority and spiritual leadership come from God alone. The almonds on the staff indicated that Aaron's priesthood would be fruitful, bringing spiritual nourishment to Israel, just as almonds were among the first fruits of the land. The budding of the staff also served as a warning to those who might question God's chosen leadership, reminding the people of the fate of Korah and his followers when they rebelled against God's order. The connection between Aaron's staff and the tabernacle extended beyond this miraculous event. Almond blossoms were also featured in the design of the golden lampstand, or menorah, inside the tabernacle. Exodus 25 verses 31 to 36 describes how the branches of the menorah were shaped like almond blossoms, reinforcing the almond tree's association with divine revelation and spiritual enlightenment. Just as the menorah provided light in the holy place, the priesthood represented by Aaron's staff served as a source of divine guidance, intercession, and blessing for Israel. Aaron's staff was not just a symbol of authority but also a functional item he could carry. In ancient times, staffs were commonly used by leaders, shepherds, and priests as a representation of guidance, divine appointment, and leadership. It was likely a wooden rod, similar to a walking stick or a shepherd's staff, which could be held or leaned upon. When the miracle occurred, the staff sprouted buds, blossoms, and almonds, but this transformation did not make it unwieldy or too large to carry. The text does not suggest that it became excessively large or heavy, only that it visibly bore signs of life and divine favor. Since it was placed in the tabernacle of the covenant as a lasting reminder of God's choice of Aaron, it would have been small enough to store within the sacred space. The Levites were one of the 12 tribes of Israel, set apart by God for priestly and religious duties rather than receiving a land inheritance like the other tribes. Their role was essential in maintaining Israel's worship system and ensuring the proper handling of sacred objects. They served as priests under Aaron's lineage, maintained the tabernacle and later the temple, protected sacred objects, including the Ark of the Covenant, and taught and interpreted God's laws to the people. Aaron's staff was not just a sign of personal selection but a validation of the Levites' role as the spiritual caretakers of Israel. The Ark of the Covenant was a sacred chest that represented God's presence among his people. It was placed inside the Holy of Holies, the most sacred part of the tabernacle and later the temple. According to Hebrews 9 verse 4, the ark contained the tablets of the Ten Commandments, Aaron's budding staff, and a golden jar of manna. The ark was constructed of acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold, featuring 2 golden cherubim on its lid. It was so holy that only the high priest could approach it once a year on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. While the ark's current location remains unknown, traditions suggest it was hidden before the destruction of the First Temple in 586 BCE by the Babylonians. Some theories place it in Ethiopia, hidden under the Temple Mount, or lost in history. The Tabernacle was a portable sanctuary that the Israelites carried during their 40 years in the wilderness. It was the first central place of worship and was replaced by Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem around 960 BCE. It consisted of 3 main sections: the outer court, which contained the bronze altar for sacrifices, and the bronze basin for priestly cleansing; the holy place, which held the golden lampstand, the table of showbread, and the altar of incense; and the Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber where the Ark of the Covenant was kept, symbolizing God's presence. The Levites were responsible for maintaining and transporting the tabernacle and later the temple in Jerusalem. Aaron's budding staff in Numbers 17 was more than a simple miracle. It was a confirmation of divine leadership, a warning against rebellion, and a testimony of God's authority. Its placement in the Ark of the Covenant ensured that future generations would remember that leadership in Israel was not based on human ambition but on divine selection. The Levites, led by Aaron, were the only ones chosen to mediate between God and Israel. The budding of a dead staff symbolized resurrection, divine authority, and God's power to transform. The staff was kept as a permanent sign against questioning God's ordained order. Numbers 17, the Levitical priesthood, and the sacred relics of Israel remain deeply significant in both biblical theology and historical tradition. Whether viewed as a literal miracle, a historical event, or a theological lesson, Aaron's budding staff stands as a timeless symbol of God's authority, divine selection, and the sacred order he established. The event demonstrated that God's choice of leaders is beyond human challenge, serving as both an assurance of his faithfulness and a cautionary reminder that rebellion against divine order leads to judgment. Through this miraculous sign, God settled the matter once and for all, affirming that Aaron and the Levites were the only ones permitted to serve as priests and mediate between him and his people.
Thank you for listening to SendMe Radio. www.sendmeradio.com. Ask Alexa to play